Welcome to another episode of Miami Cop Talk. I'm Raul, and with me here is my partner, Robert Asencio, and we got a great guest today. She's amazing. She wears a lot of hats. I know her personally. We've worked together on several projects, and I'm going to let her give her background. Ivon Mesa. Go ahead, Ivon. Give a background. I don't want to spoil it because you have an impressive job.
I just do not want to get into my long title.
Yeah, actually.
Oh, yeah, it's very impressive. Let me tell you.
Very long, very long. Okay, so thank you very much for having me on this wonderful show. It's a great privilege to be here, sharing this time with you. Basically, what I do is I work for Miami-Dade County. I work for the Community Action and Services Department. And within that department, I oversee a bureau, which is called the Targeted Services Bureau, which is basically the combination of two different divisions. One of the divisions is the Violence Prevention and Intervention Division, and the other one is the Family Community Division. So that's what I mean. That's who I am.
And the acronym is CVAC, right?
Yes.
For those Coordinating Victim Assistance Center.
Basically, CVAC is one of the programs that falls under the Violence Prevention and Intervention Division.
Okay.
So it's one of the programs that I oversee, one that I created. I'm very proud of that program because I think it was very, very much needed. And, basically we do a lot from there. I know you are very familiar with the CVAC, and we provide a lot of assistance, which I'm sure we're going to discuss.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so real quick, Ivon, we wanted to have you on the show because we just did a segment with somebody who I believe you worked with and have, I don't know when the last time you spoke to, Tom Tundidor.
Yeah.
Right, great guy, right? A trainer.
Yes.
So we just did a series on human trafficking.
Okay.
And, we're running providing information to people about human trafficking, something that you know quite a bit of. How big is the problem of human trafficking in South Florida, and what is your department doing to service them?
Okay, so basically, unfortunately, the program of human trafficking, it's of great magnitude. It's basically a situation that places the state of Florida on the third state, being the third state in the country, only followed or only superseded by California and by Texas. So the first state in the United States that has the most number of cases when it comes to human trafficking is California, then it's Texas, and unfortunately, then it's the state of Florida. So that tells you, in a nutshell, how important that issue is and how much we're really affected by that crime in the state of Florida. Now, within the state of Florida, Miami is one of the most affected cities because, of course, we have a great population here and a lot of immigrants, and we have a lot of different things that make us very vulnerable to human trafficking. So the problem is of great magnitudes. It's really a serious problem in the state of Florida and in Miami.
Wow. And I'm sorry, just one follow-up question.
Sure.
So what is your office or your division, right? Because it's not just an office. I mean, you're the lady of many hats.
Yes, I am.
What is it that you guys are doing?
So with regard to human trafficking, we do a multitude of things. One of the things that we do is that we have a center, which is called the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center, which is a center where we assist victims of crime, particularly victims of domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual violence, and dating violence. So basically within that center, we have 38 partners that are co-located within the facility. So when a victim walks in, we do an initial assessment of the needs of the victim and the level of danger, and then we connect that victim with those 38 partners that are within the facility. So basically, in that sense, we do a lot of direct services, but that is not where we end. We also created in 2014, we realized that this problem was of a major magnitude, and we decided to go ahead and create what is called the Miami-Dade County Services Human Trafficking Coalition, by which we meet, and we have all of the service providers that come into that forum, and there we talk about everything that needs to be talked about. One of the things that we realized when we got into this topic was that all the partners were working, they were doing great things, but there wasn't a common ground, a common territory where we would all get together and talk and advise one another of what we were doing. So we created that, and not only did we create it, but we share currently we chair the coalition. So we also have another component, which is an educational component. So we go to schools, universities, we go everywhere, hospitals, any non-for-profit and for-profit business that would like to get a presentation on human trafficking. We do that. We have a team of 13 individuals that are trilingual. So we have capacity in Spanish, Creole, and English. And we go out and just let people know what this is and how to protect themselves, how to protect their children. Because I think that to a lot of individuals, when they hear human trafficking, they think of something that happens in Asia, in Africa, in other continents. They don't know that it's happening right here in Kendall, or so basically one of the things that we do is we alert them to that, we inform them and raise awareness. So we basically do a lot of different things, direct services, education, community advocacy, etc.
Yvonne, it's a good thing. I want to, pivot on what you just said. When people think human trafficking, they think of, the movie Taken. They think of all these, Hollywood, craziness that again tend to happen overseas because, not in this country. This is the United States, and it doesn't happen here and whatnot. But it does happen here. Happens in our own backyard. We know human trafficking. What is it? Fraud, force, and coercion. Those are the three elements to have human trafficking as a situation. But can you tell us, without getting into names or specifics or exposing anybody out there, can you give us a case, a scenario, something that you dealt with in your center with a victim and whatnot that really hits home? Because I know some of the folks that have gone through your programs there at the Coordinated Victim Assistance Center, and it breaks my heart because these are individuals that you would not imagine are victims of either domestic violence or human trafficking, and these are members of our community.
Absolutely. So basically, the situation of human trafficking presents itself from many different scenarios. You have those cases in which there is a little bit of domestic violence involved, because sometimes we're talking about situations in which there is a couple involved. It's basically the pimp, but she doesn't know that when it's happening. She thinks it's my boyfriend. I even could say my husband, because I've had cases in which it's a married couple, and the individual, the abuser, the trafficker, has begun to force his wife to have sex, and et cetera, et cetera. But so it comes from that domestic violence perspective, but it also comes from strangers in the community. It comes from basically all kind of individuals. Unfortunately, we've had from teachers to individuals within the faith community, because basically what this is exploitation of humans. It's what is called modern day slavery, because
Correct.
an individual wants to profit from exploiting these other individuals. So I think it's important, Raul, that we let the viewers know that we're talking about mainly two phenomena. One is the one that has to do with labor. So a lot of victims, a lot of individuals become victims of human trafficking because they are forced to work without wanting and without proper compensation. And then the other aspect of it is the exploitation of sexual, it's sexual human trafficking, which then it comes from the perspective of individuals who force other, particularly and mostly women, but it could happen to men too. Indeed, it happens to men. But most of the victims are females, and so they end up being forced to prostitute themselves, and they have to, of course, give the profit of their actions to this individual who is the trafficker. So it can present itself as an stranger. For example, sometimes a lot of women that we have assisted have come to the United States, and particularly not only from the outside of the country, but from within the country, from other states. They have come here seeking a modeling career, seeking a series of career choices. When they get here, one of the things that occurs is that they are immediately supposedly it looks like they are accommodating you. They give you an apartment, or they bring you into a place where there are other girls, women, and you think that you're being part of something.
Correct.
Then they go ahead and they take away your ID, they take away your cell phone, and so. But it's not something that happens immediately from that perspective. So sometimes victims it takes them a while to realize that they're in that situation. I can remember, I remember many cases, but there was a case of human trafficking that the individual came here from another state, again, seeking a modeling career. And then after a week here, being in a hotel, she was transported to this other location that was a home where there were a lot of girls. Nothing weird so far, because you're thinking that these are other individuals who are also seeking this career, so you're okay. But then again, then the issue of give me your, they take away your cell, they take away your ID, and you find yourself, and also there is a big component of substance abuse. So now that comes along with you being drugged and not being able to take action. It comes with the element of fear, because, of course, these individuals, and this is very important, Raul, that we emphasize the fact that, like, when we talk about domestic violence, we're talking about a crime that is not an organized crime. Like, you're talking about an individual who abuses somebody else, and that's it. But when you talk about human trafficking, you're talking about an organized crime where there are resources put into that crime. So you find yourself in a situation where you're being watched and you're being controlled. Period. So some people think, well, why don't they walk away? Of course, they don't walk away because they can't, because they have all kind of situations, all type of controls, tactics that are
Coercion.
used. Coercion, one of the many, so that they are basically paralyzed. They really don't have the freedom of getting up and I'm leaving. That's not how it goes down. And it prolongs itself. I have had victims that I have assisted that they have been in a human trafficking situation for more than 15 years.
Wow.
20 years, 15 years, 12 years. So the situations vary very much. From one, for example, that we had where the husband was the trafficker, and because they had a child in common, that was the mechanism, that was the tactic that was used by the trafficker to keep her in the business, because she would say, if you take action, if you leave me, I am going to go ahead and and do something to her daughter. And indeed, he did. He sexually molested, assaulted his own daughter, and ended up being that when we rescued his family, the daughter was 15 years old and she had never stepped foot into a school setting.
Wow.
So we just when we got her, she was 15, and that was the first time that she went to school.
Yvonne,
So-
I don't want to cut you off, but you're saying something that's very important. Here's a person that was involved in a relationship. They were married. So this just didn't happen from one day to the next. When there's fraud, obviously, there's force, there's coercion. Those are the elements that we look at. But there's a trust factor. You're gaining a trust from the victim, and the victim is almost like the Stockholm syndrome. You are basically kidnapped, and you're held in this scenario where you can't get out of. And in Spanish, we have hablando la gente se entiende. If you feel that you're in that kind of a scenario, you got to talk to somebody.
Correct.
Who can these people reach out to?
Well, right now, because we have a certain level of awareness, the police, for example, it's a body that has been trained and is highly sensitive to human trafficking. Then we have an entire, like, for example, the center that I represent, or the division that I oversee, that we have shelters. We have transitional programs where victims can live up to 2 years. And we have then the outreach programs such as CVAC, where we are able to assist them with rental assistance, with benefits, you name it. We have partners such as Victory for Youth that provide food and so on and so forth. So basically, again, I think that the most important message is that this is not something that looks only one way.
Correct.
And that it presents itself on one way only. Because if we train our fellow viewers to understand that you just have to be alerted to how it can come into your life.
Yeah.
Sometimes, for example, it could be, I had this particular victim that she was dating her boyfriend, and she had a fight with the boyfriend. She went out in the streets, she was angry and so on, very young, by the way. And she was recruited by her classmate, which was also a high schooler at the time. And she saw that she was going through a crisis, and she told her, listen, why don't you join us? We're going to have a party. They went to the party, and there she was drugged heavily. And basically she woke up like 3 days later, and she was tied to a bed, and she had not eaten, taken a shower, and so this particular trafficker used starvation as one of the tactics that he used to control her, in addition to, of course, fear and so on and so forth, because he tied her down, kind of like in a sense, like you would do to an animal, kind of like to train you into realizing that this is how it's going to be.
Compliance.
Exactly. So then she woke up and she was a victim already.
So we have been talking to Ivon Mesa of CBAC, a Miami-Dade County office that helps victims of human trafficking, sex crimes, domestic violence, homeless people. I mean, you guys do a lot. But I'd like to transition to something that you just mentioned, and you said it earlier.
Sure.
Human traffickers, there's a component of association of, at times, domestic violence, right? So I'm going to give you a story real quick because I know the system works. It's a little hard to get into, but once you're in the system works. I'd like you to provide our viewers contact information for anybody that's out there in need and for resources. Can you do that for them? And then I got another question for you.
The system works. Absolutely. Basically, one of the phone numbers, there are a lot of different numbers, but there are a lot of different numbers, but one of the numbers that we can
I see you doing a live share.
Yes. Well, trying because something went wrong there. But one of the things that one of the numbers that we can give is a local number, which is the 305-285-5900.
Can you repeat that?
Yes, of course. It's 305-285-5900. Okay. And that is a local number where individuals can call if they're victims of human trafficking, domestic violence, sexual violence, dating violence, stalking, all of those crimes. They can call that number. It's a 24-hour helpline that the county staffs.
So there's a story that I'd like to share. Those of you that follow me on Facebook, you may remember this roughly a little over a year ago. We named the lady Maria to keep her identity secret. I discovered her literally when I was at the government center one morning. I was doing a video and she was there. Actually, the bus driver, the MTA bus driver, walked over to me and pointed out that there was a lady that was homeless. She was homeless and she walked away and ultimately she was the victim of domestic abuse, but she was with a young girl. Okay. She was with a 15-year-old daughter. And Maria's daughter. And ultimately, she was the victim of domestic abuse, but she was with a young. So Maria's daughter, and Maria were living on the street, and they spent about 24, maybe a little more than 24 hours on the street. Yeah. And they were going to sleep the night. It was a long weekend on the bus bench.
Homeless,
right?
Yeah.
But after being battered by her husband, who had kept the daughter and the Maria pretty much like slaves, hostage. You guys were able to get her in the system, but also give her a place to stay and help her educate herself, right?
Absolutely.
Because she doesn't have a job. She didn't know. That's why she was staying with the abuser, because she was not, dependent, self-sufficient. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because there's a lot of people in the community watching us. And by the way, domestic violence, domestic abuse, human trafficking, sex crimes, homelessness knows no socioeconomic group, knows no community that it basically discriminates against.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that, please? Because
absolutely.
I like people to know what you're doing.
Okay, so basically, as I mentioned before, I oversee a bureau, right? And one of the divisions that I oversee is the Violence Prevention and Intervention Division. So that division is solely dedicated to assisting victims of crime. So obviously, it's not enough to just, for example, assist a victim with food, because where is she going to sleep and where is she going to live? And so they need a multitude of things. Often they need mental health assistance. They need housing. They need food too, of course. And they need an injunction for protection, for example. They need to press charges against the domestic violence perpetrator or the trafficker. So basically, the center that we have is a center that is designed to address all of these issues together. One of the things that really prevents women and men, both victims of crime, from seeking the assistance that they need is trauma. And I feel that we need to talk about trauma for a minute so that the viewers understand that trauma is a phenomenon that would paralyze a victim. And that trauma, if it is not addressed correctly at the time that is happening, if that victim does not have that understanding from the service providers that is assisting her, that could actually turn into the worst enemy of the victim. Because on many occasions, or most of the time, I would say, unfortunately, we have a picture in our mind of how a victim looks like. We feel that a victim is going to come and is going to cooperate and is going to do this and it's going to be so grateful because now we're helping her, when that's not the way that it happens. Mm-hmm. The fact that a victim does not comply with everything that we tell her or tell him does not mean that they are not cooperating, does not mean that they want to stay in the abusive relationship. It means that they are suffering from trauma. Trauma makes everything look different to these individuals who are going through this. And if we as service providers do not have that training to understand the fact that, for example, I remember distinctively a case that we had where we were sending this individual to get some assistance with the partner. And because we had many victims on that day, we couldn't physically transport her. So we took her to a bus station and we left her there. She was going to take the bus and go to this office, right? So at the end of the day, we got notification that she never made it. But we dropped her off at the station. We did exactly the same on the second day, and she never made it. And then on the third day, she never made it. So immediately, the employees assisting her, they become judgmental if they don't have the right training, because they are now blaming her. They are seeing her as part of the problem. So when we discussed this matter with her, then we realized that what was happening to her was that she's from Mexico, and in the town in which she used to live, every time that she would get in a bus, she would be sexually assaulted. She would be raped. So she had a lot of trauma that came from getting on a bus, being raped. To her were the same thing. Mm-hmm. So if we had not really looked into that trauma, if we had not really learned those things that trigger her behavior, then we would have continued to take her to the bus station, and this would have been a process that would have resulted in nothing. So you have to look at all that is involved in the crime that occurred, and work with every client, because every client is different. You may have one that is very active in her safety planning, one that has a lot of energy and she feels very energetic about her future. You may have another one that is not, that is taking more of a passive role. She's disoriented, she's confused, doesn't know who to trust. Because if you're a victim, you come with trust issues normally, because someone did that to you. So you're already having to deal with that. And you come into a setting where you have all these people that are alleged to be helping you, but most of the times victims get victimized by someone who was close to them, was helping them, or was at least in their network, and they still got victimized. So that rapport needs to be earned when you're in this field. You just don't meet someone and she's going to trust you 100% because you're a social worker. It just doesn't work.
So you're also not just providing assistance, immediate assistance, you're providing follow-up assistance, whether there's psychological services, court services. I suspect you work very closely
Absolutely.
with the state attorney's office, make
Absolutely.
sure that these people, whether they have the injunction order or follow up with the cases. What about if the crime occurs, because you're a county facility or county agency, occurs in a city, municipality?
Yeah.
Do
that doesn't make a difference. We are county, we provide services countywide, and beyond county, we provide services to anybody that walks into that door and claims to be a victim. They don't have to be from Miami-Dade County. Indeed, in the case of human trafficking, most of the time they're not, because, and in some domestic violence cases, they are not, because they're fleeing from different jurisdictions. So the jurisdiction is a non-issue when it comes to seeking assistance from our program.
So in our last 2 minutes, Raul, you want to tell them what they're doing, what we're doing and who we're talking to? Or you want to close?
Yeah, this is Miami Cop Talk. Visit us on MiamiCopTalk.com, and we're talking to Ivon Mesa. She is the Bureau Chief of
the Targeted Services Bureau.
That's a long title. Yeah, the Targeted. Now, I will say, I wanted to ask a brief question right before we end in our last minutes. How big of a component in this human trafficking victimization thing is social media? I can imagine a lot of people, especially when we have events in South Florida, we've talked about in the past, the Super Bowl, Ultra, you name it. There's major events, Calle Ocho, whatever it may be, social media, ads in the paper. People should really be aware of that. How big is that as a tool to lure people in?
Absolutely. It's a huge tool. The funny thing with social media is that it plays both roles. It could be immense when it comes to actually recruiting, and attracting victims into this crime. But it also could be very beneficial, as you guys are doing right now in educating the community. But basically, it allows perpetrators to seek out certain individuals. There is a certain profile that they look for, being the main element, vulnerability. They're looking for someone that, for whatever reason, the reasons can vary,
Correct.
but they're looking for someone that is vulnerable, that can actually fall into their traps and into their tactics. And so social media plays a huge role because it is used. They're looking, they're watching. That's why it has been estimated that for any teen that runs away, within 48 hours from that moment in which they run away from home, they will be recruited by a human trafficker. That's why it is so important to educate parents that if you're having issues with your teen, throwing them out of the house is not the way to go.
Wow.
Before you do that, you should never do that. But I'm saying if you're going to do that, you need to have already exhausted many things, because once you put your teen out there, then you're really making them, or making her or him, very vulnerable and definitely more accessible to a human trafficker.
Yeah, and if you want more information, visit MiamiCopTalk.com. On our website, we have a slew of information. We have a link to resources and whatnot. We're partnering with the Dade Chiefs Association. We want to get information out. We want to inform the community. We want to be a resource to the community. And as we close, Robert, final words?
Man, this topic just blows my mind. I can think as a Latino in our community. I can say this because soy Latino, right?
Of course.
In our community, we have a lot of victimization. And I know it doesn't stop there. So, Ivon, thank you. You go along our heroes behind the badge and behind the community service, right?
Thank
I
you.
can't thank you enough on behalf of Cop Talk, Miami Cop Talk, that is. Please visit us, MiamiCopTalk.com, like Raul keeps saying. Visit our website. Visit us on Facebook, social media at Miami Cop Talk, but also follow our podcast. Subscribe, help us grow. Please provide information or your thoughts. Share your thoughts with us. Look forward to seeing you guys next time. On behalf of the Miami Cop Talk family, we're here at Miami's Community Newspapers. We want to thank everybody that helps us get the show aired. Thank you. Bye.
You have been listening to Miami Cop Talk. We hope you have enjoyed this episode, and visit us at MiamiCopTalk.com to get the latest on all our broadcasts. We want to thank our partners and sponsors that have made Miami Cop Talk possible. And on behalf of Robert Asencio and Raul Correa, we want to thank you for listening to Miami Cop Talk. Stay connected and visit us at MiamiCopTalk.com.